Hey, way, John chapter 5 today. There's a lot going on here at this time. There's the Feast of the Jews, which is probably the Feast of Pentecost that we see. So there's a whole lot of people in Jerusalem. And Jesus comes to this man by what's called the Pool of Bethesda. And it's a place where it was said when this pool bubbles up, the first person in gets healed. And so there was all sorts of people in need, from being paralyzed to have any sorts of leprosy and whatever going on. And what would happen is they would all just lay around there all day. This guy that Jesus came to was there for 38 years. 38 years he was waiting and trying, and nobody was there to help him. What he would tell Jesus is, there's nobody to pick me up and bring me into the pool. So this is where they're at. The first one in gets the prize. The first one in gets healed. And Jesus comes to this man at the pool and he asks him, do you want to be healed? Yeah, obviously I want to be healed, right? He didn't say that, but he says, there's nobody to bring me into the pool. And so Jesus does what he always does, which is something unexpected. He doesn't lift the man into the pool. He wasn't a man that came to help us get first place, a man to help us do better. Jesus was a man, God himself, who came to save us. And he does this here with this man by the pool. He doesn't lift him into the pool. He doesn't help him be first place. He takes him out of the competition altogether and says, you are saved. Take up your mat and walk. He takes him out of the thing altogether. But this goes to something deeper here in the rest of the chapter, which is the Jews and their developing hatred for Jesus because of how they perceive he's mocking their traditions and mocking their religion, which for them, for a lot of them, for the Pharisees especially, and the ones who would end up wanting to see Jesus die and killing him, it was a religion. It was a religion and not a relationship. And what's interesting is we get into the rest of chapter 5 here, we see that, and we see Jesus's call on his own life in telling them about the authority that he has, but also a picture of how we can experience that same thing in our relationship with God. Because in verse 30, he says, I can do nothing on my own. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. And that's what we should be seeking. See, we come to faith through Jesus and his sacrifice on the cross, and then his resurrection and his power and authority in those things. But that power and authority, very clearly in this passage, Jesus is saying it comes from my Father. So we need to come through Jesus by the power of the Holy Spirit, but to God in relationship with him, so that we can experience his best for our life, so we can sync up our will to his and what he is already doing. If Jesus is saying this here in John chapter 5, if Jesus is saying, I can do what I do, I have these powers because my Father in heaven has granted them to me, because I'm syncing up what I'm doing here with what he wants. I can do nothing outside of what he wants. If Jesus is saying that, then that's our clue that that's where we need to go. That's who we need to sync up our plans and the thoughts of our life and where we should be going with what God is already doing. Not an emphasis on we were created with all these gifts and talents and visions and desires for our own life and to move in that direction, and then God will bless that. That's not what we see. That's not the example Jesus lays out here. Jesus submits himself to his Father in all ways. And in that, he is given the power and authority by God to do things. And when we submit to God, then he will give us the power, the authority, the strength. He will line up our will with his. He will give us all the things we need to accomplish his will on this life, in this life. And through that is where we are going to experience the most fulfillment, the most joy, the most satisfaction. The best life we can live is by understanding where power and authority actually resides. It's the one who sent his Son for us, for me, and for you. So let's look at John 5 today. Let's see that in there. And I'm sure you're going to see all sorts of other stuff. The Holy Spirit's going to bring things to your mind and to your heart. But that was one of the things I saw today, is just over and over and over Jesus pointing towards the Father, and how our lives should then also reflect the same mirroring over and over and over. Our lives and our attention should be towards the Father and reflect Him. All right, have a great day.